You're not going to believe this. My mom threw me out of the house the day I turned 18. No backup plan, no safety net. Just, you're grown now, figure it out. I was sleeping on couches, working 2 jobs, scraping together rent while she pretended I didn't exist. And now, years later, after all the silence and blame, guess who shows up calling me son again? She's drowning in debt. And suddenly I'm the lifeline she thinks she deserves. I grew up in a house where survival was more important than love. My mom wasn't the nurturing type. She was the my way or the highway kind of parent. Every rule came with a threat. Every small mistake turned into a lecture about how I'd never make it on my own. Still, I clung to the idea that she was my mom, flawed, strict, unpredictable, but deep down, still on my side. I thought once I turned 18, things would get easier. I was wrong. On my 18th birthday, instead of cake or even a simple congratulations, she handed me a trash bag for my clothes and told me I had until the end of the day to leave. No warning, no conversation about college or a future plan. Just, you're an adult now. Time to pay for your own life. I remember standing in my room, stuffing shirts and jeans into that bag, shaking so badly I could barely zip it shut. My friends were celebrating senior year milestones, and I was figuring out which couch I could crash on without wearing out my welcome too quickly. The months that followed were brutal. I worked whatever shifts I could get, gas stations, late-night fast food, delivery gigs. Sometimes I slept in my car. Sometimes I didn't sleep at all. Every time I thought about calling her, the same voice in my head shut it down. She made her choice. So I learned to survive without her. Not just survive. Eventually, I managed to build something resembling a life. A tiny apartment, bills barely covered, but mine. My rules, my effort. What stung the most wasn't even being thrown out. It was how easily she cut me off. No birthdays, no calls, no how are you doing. I became invisible. Like once I stopped being her responsibility, I stopped existing. And even though I told myself I didn't care, there were nights where that silence pressed on me harder than hunger or exhaustion. Years passed. I grew up the hard way, while she stayed where she was. Always chasing quick money. Always blaming someone else for her bad luck. I heard through cousins that she was drowning in credit cards, payday loans, and schemes that never worked out. But it wasn't my problem. At least, that's what I told myself. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. I almost ignored it. But something made me swipe. And there it was, her voice. Too casual, too familiar, like the last decade hadn't happened. "Hi, honey," she said. Honey. After years of silence, suddenly I was honey again. She started talking about hard times and families sticking together. I felt my stomach twist. I knew what was coming before she even asked. She wanted help. With her debts. And the worst part? She sounded like she expected me to say yes. The call didn't just bring back her voice. It brought back the 18-year-old version of me, standing on the curb with a trash bag of clothes, watching the door slam shut behind me. I thought I'd buried that memory deep, but hearing her say hi, honey, tore it wide open. At first, I didn't even know how to answer. My mouth went dry. My instinct was to hang up, but I stayed on the line, listening to her warm, almost rehearsed tone. She talked about how she'd been thinking about me, how life gets complicated, and how family should stick together no matter what. I waited, because I knew this wasn't just a casual call. There was always a hook with her. Then came the shift. Her voice dropped half an octave, that faux sincere sigh I remembered from childhood. I hate to even bring this up, but I'm in a tough spot. Some debts piled up. Medical bills, credit cards. You know how it is, she trailed off, like she expected me to fill in the blanks. I didn't. Finally, she said it. I need some help. Just until I get back on my feet. You're doing okay now, right? You've always been strong. I knew you'd land on your feet. I laughed. Out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was unreal. Strong? I slept in my car for weeks because of her. I missed out on scholarships because I didn't have a stable address. I ate ramen for months, working double shifts just to keep a roof over my head. And now, suddenly, that was proof I could afford to bail her out. I asked her the only question that mattered. Where were you when I needed help? Silence. For a few seconds, just breathing on the other end. Then she snapped, defensive as always. Don't bring up the past. You were 18. You had to learn responsibility. And look, you turned out fine. I did what I had to do. Now it's your turn to step up for me. That hit me harder than I expected. Not just the audacity of rewriting history, but the entitlement dripping from every word. She didn't say please. She didn't say, I'm sorry. She just assumed the years of absence didn't matter, that she could re-enter my life as if nothing happened, and that I'd jump at the chance to clean up her mess. I felt my pulse pounding in my ears. A mix of anger, disbelief, and, shamefully, a flicker of guilt. Because that's what she was good at, making me feel guilty for not giving her what she wanted. Even after everything, part of me still wanted her approval, some tiny acknowledgement that I mattered. But it wasn't there. There was just expectation. I told her I needed time to think. She huffed, annoyed, but agreed to call back soon. Before hanging up, she added, "You'll do the right thing. I raised you better than that." Raised me? Better. The irony almost made me choke. When the call ended, I sat staring at my phone, heart racing. For years I had trained myself not to care, not to wonder if she'd ever reach out. And now she had, and it was worse than I imagined. I thought the hardest part was surviving after she threw me out. I was wrong. The hardest part was deciding what to do now. But that was just the beginning. I couldn't shake the call from my head. For the next couple of days, I kept replaying it in my mind. The forced sweetness, the casual way she brushed off the past, the audacity of expecting me to swoop in and fix her problems. Part of me wanted to block her number and move on. Another part, the one that still carried that 18-year-old scars, needed to know what I was really dealing with. So I did something I swore I'd never do again. I called her back. She picked up on the first ring, almost like she'd been waiting by the phone. "See, I knew you'd come around," she said, skipping over any kind of greeting. The smugness in her tone made my stomach clench, but I bit my tongue. I asked her to be specific, what debts, how much, what exactly she wanted from me. That's when the floodgates opened. She started listing off credit card balances, past due notices, personal loans. At first, it sounded like a couple thousand, bad but not catastrophic. Then the numbers kept climbing. 5,000 here, 8,000 there. A payday loan that had doubled with interest. Medical bills from visits she forgot to pay. By the time she finished, the total was north of 30 grand. $30,000. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, feeling like the room was spinning. I don't even make that much in a year after rent and bills. And she was talking about it like it was pocket change, like it was just a temporary setback that her strong, responsible son could fix. I asked her point blank how she expected me to cover that. Her response? "You've got a good job now. You live in the city. You're probably making more than you need. Besides, you don't have kids or a family to support. It's just you. You can help." That one cut deep. She was using my independence, the independence I earned because she forced me out, as proof that I owed her. It wasn't just manipulative, it was insulting. I told her there was no way I could just write a check for 30 grand. She brushed it off, saying, "Well, maybe not all at once, but you could at least take care of the urgent ones. The collectors are calling every day, and they're ruthless. You don't want them showing up here, do you?" And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the money. It was about dragging me back into her chaos, making me responsible for her mistakes, the way she always tried to when I was a kid. After the call, I couldn't sit still. I went online, did some digging, even reached out to one of my cousins. Turns out she hadn't just been drowning quietly. She'd been making a spectacle of it. Borrowing from relatives, guilt-tripping neighbors, even posting on Facebook about how her ungrateful son abandoned her. Ungrateful. That was the word she chose. The more I learned, the clearer it became. This wasn't a desperate mom asking her son for help. This was a toxic pattern repeating itself, just on a bigger scale. And for the first time, I started to realize, maybe she wasn't just in debt financially. Maybe she was bankrupt in every other way, too. But I wasn't ready for what I was about to discover next. I thought I had a pretty good handle on who my mom was. Harsh, selfish, manipulative, yes, but also predictable. After that second phone call, I figured I'd already seen the worst of it. The entitlement, the revisionist history, the mountain of debt. I was wrong. A few nights later, my cousin texted me. "You should see what she's posting now." I clicked the link, bracing myself, but I still wasn't ready. There it was on Facebook, her face, tears streaming down, writing a long post about how her only son had abandoned her in her hour of need. She wrote about how she'd sacrificed everything to raise me, how she was now sick and penniless, and how her child refused to even pick up the phone. My name wasn't in the post, but it didn't need to be. The comments section was filled with sympathy and outrage directed at me, even though most of those people didn't know me. How could he treat his mother like this? One woman wrote. Kids today have no respect, another said. And then, what really made my hands shake, I saw familiar names. Old neighbors, distant relatives. People who had once seen me riding my bike down the street or mowing her lawn were now convinced I was some heartless monster. It wasn't just lies. It was public execution. I scrolled further and found screenshots she'd posted. Carefully cropped text messages, edited to make it look like I was cursing her out and refusing to help. Except I knew those weren't real. The timestamps didn't even line up with when we'd spoken. She had fabricated conversations. My stomach dropped. My own mother was creating fake receipts to destroy my reputation. That night, I couldn't sleep. My heart kept racing, my thoughts looping. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to process the betrayal. This wasn't just her trying to guilt-trip me. This was her trying to annihilate me socially. To make sure if I didn't pay her debts, I'd at least pay in humiliation. I wanted to believe there had to be some mistake, that maybe she didn't realize how bad it looked. But deep down I knew. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was weaponizing pity. And she'd been doing it long before this, just never on such a scale. The next day, I confronted her. I called and went straight to the point. Why are you posting lies about me online? Her tone changed instantly. Gone was the fake sweetness. She was sharp, cold, almost sneering. If you're so worried about what people think, maybe you should help your mother instead of making me look like the villain. I'm just telling the truth. You've abandoned me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The audacity was staggering. She had thrown me out at 18, cut me off, ignored me for years, and now she was painting me as the betrayer. I didn't abandon you, I said, my voice shaking. You abandoned me. You made me leave when I had nothing. And now you want me to fix your mess? You're rewriting history, Mom. There was a pause. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. History is what people believe. And right now, everyone believes me. That broke something inside me. I felt sick to my stomach, my hands trembling so badly I had to grip the edge of the table. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was annihilation of reality itself. She wasn't just lying. She was building an alternate world where she was the victim and I was the heartless child. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. After the call, I sat in silence, staring at my phone like it was radioactive. I couldn't stop shaking. My mind was buzzing, my chest tight. I realized that if I didn't act, if I just stayed quiet like I had at 18, her version of the story would win. Everyone would believe I was the ungrateful son. And worse, part of me feared she was right. That maybe history really was just what people believed. But then a thought struck me, a dangerous, empowering thought. If she was willing to create fake evidence, then maybe it was time I started gathering real evidence. Because if I was going to stop this, I needed more than anger. I needed proof. I wasn't ready for what I was about to uncover. Once I made the decision to dig deeper, I couldn't stop. It felt like pulling a thread from an old sweater. Every tug revealed another knot, another lie holding the whole thing together. I started with the obvious, screenshots of her Facebook posts, comments from relatives, even the fake text conversations she'd created. I saved everything. If she was rewriting history, I was determined to keep the receipts. But the real revelation came when I reached out to people in her orbit. I messaged my aunt, her sister, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. I half expected her to ignore me, but she replied almost instantly. I'm glad you reached out. You need to know what's been going on. That line alone made my stomach sink. She told me my mom had been making the rounds for months, telling everyone who would listen that I cut her off after she sacrificed everything for me. She'd asked my aunt for money, saying she was too embarrassed to tell me directly. Then she hit up cousins, neighbors, even people from church. Each time, the story shifted slightly, but the villain was always the same, me. According to my aunt, she'd even shown people proof, screenshots of text messages where I supposedly told her I wish she was dead. When I asked if she believed it, my aunt sighed. I know you better than that. But not everyone does. She's convincing, and she knows how to cry on command. That was bad enough. But then came the real gut punch. My mom hadn't just been asking for help with her debts. She'd been borrowing money in my name. Apparently, she told a family friend that I was helping her, and that she just needed a short-term loan until I could transfer the money. The friend, trusting her, handed over $2,000, thinking I was in on it. When the money never came back, My name was the one that looked dirty. I felt my chest tighten, anger rising so fast I could hardly breathe. It wasn't just slander anymore. It was fraud, and she was dragging me down with her. I spent that night combing through my credit reports, half expecting to see accounts I didn't recognize. To my relief, nothing was there, yet. But the fact that she was willing to lie to people using my name meant it was only a matter of time before she tried something bigger. The next day, I decided to confront her in person. I drove back to the town I swore I'd never return to, my heart pounding the whole way. Pulling up to her house felt like stepping into a time machine. The same peeling paint, the same squeaky gate. Only now, instead of being the kid she kicked out, I was the adult standing on my own 2 feet. When she opened the door, she looked surprised, then smug. "I knew you'd come around," she said, as if the last decade of silence was just a warm-up. I didn't waste time. I pulled out my phone, showing her screenshots of her posts, the fake messages, the texts from family members. "Why are you lying about me?" I asked, my voice shaking but firm. For a split second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Panic, maybe guilt. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. She crossed her arms and said, "People believe what they want to believe. And right now, they believe me. Maybe if you'd been a better son, I wouldn't have to say those things." That sentence burned into me. If you'd been a better son. It wasn't just her debts I was fighting. It was her entire narrative of my life. And it was so much worse than I thought. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about identity, reputation, and the version of me she wanted the world to see. And I realized, if I didn't take control soon, her version would win. But that was only the surface. The real nightmare was still ahead. Driving back from her house, I felt like I'd swallowed fire. Every word she'd thrown at me, "If you'd been a better son," was burning its way through my chest. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. For years, I had convinced myself I was over it, that I'd built a life without her. But now, all that buried anger was clawing its way to the surface. Part of me wanted revenge. I pictured exposing her lies publicly, showing everyone the proof I'd collected. Let the same neighbors and relatives who pitted her see the real story, the Facebook screenshots, the fake texts, the borrowed money. I wanted her reputation to collapse the way she tried to collapse mine. But another part of me hesitated. Revenge meant more drama, more chaos. And hadn't I spent years clawing my way out of that? Did I really want to sink back into it just to prove a point? Maybe the strong move was to cut her off completely, block her number, ignore the noise, and let her drown in the mess she created. Then came the guilt, the one emotion she had always been able to weaponize against me. What if she really was sick? What if those debts dragged her into something worse? Could I live with myself if she hit rock bottom and I had stood by, arms crossed? I spent sleepless nights going in circles, staring at the ceiling, torn between fury and pity. My mind replayed every version of the future. Me helping her and hating myself. Me exposing her and watching the fallout. Me walking away and carrying the guilt forever. The weight of it crushed me. No matter which path I imagined, it felt like losing. But somewhere in the fog, a thought began to take shape. Maybe this wasn't just about choosing between revenge or forgiveness. Maybe there was another way. A way to protect myself, set the record straight, and finally take control of the story she kept trying to write for me. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing. The time for silence was over. And soon, I'd make my move. The decision came one morning at 3 a.m., after another night of tossing and turning. I couldn't erase her words, couldn't unsee the Facebook posts, couldn't stop hearing relatives' voices in my head. The silence wasn't protecting me anymore. It was suffocating me. So I made up my mind. I was going to fight back, but on my terms. My first step was simple proof. I organized every screenshot, every text, every call log. I started a digital folder and named it Receipts. It felt almost childish at first, but with each file I dropped in, I felt stronger, like I was building armor. Fake conversations? Saved. Facebook posts? Screenshotted with timestamps. Testimonies from cousins and my aunt. Screenshots, voice notes. Piece by piece, I was gathering the reality she wanted to erase. Then came step 2, confronting the narrative. I didn't blast her online, not yet. Instead, I started reaching out privately to the people she'd poisoned against me. An old neighbor, my uncle, even that family friend she'd borrowed money from. I told them the truth directly, sent them the evidence. Some were skeptical at first, but once they saw the fakes, the sympathy in their voices shifted to shame. More than one admitted she'd pulled similar tricks on them before. It was exhausting, but it worked. Slowly, the tide started turning. The same people who had pitted her began to distance themselves. One even promised to warn others not to lend her another dime. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't the one drowning. But then, just when I thought I had gained some control, she struck back. It started with a text. "You think you're smarter than me? You'll regret this." Then, later that night, a phone call from a blocked number. I picked up, and it was her, furious, venom dripping from every word. "You're destroying your own mother. Do you realize how disgusting that is? People are saying you're cruel. Heartless. They're right." I tried to stay calm, told her I had no choice after what she did. That's when she dropped the bomb. "If you don't stop, I'll make sure you never escape this. I'll tell everyone things you can't disprove. Lies so deep you'll spend your whole life trying to defend yourself. You think screenshots will save you? People believe me. They always have." Her voice was shaking, not with weakness, but with rage. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing control. When the call ended, my hands were trembling, but not from fear this time. From resolve. I had taken the first step, and she was rattled. She wanted me to back down, to retreat into silence again. But I wasn't that 18-year-old kid with a trash bag anymore. I had proof. I had allies. And for the first time, I had momentum. I thought maybe, just maybe, the storm was breaking. I couldn't have been more wrong. For a little while, it actually felt like I'd won. The calls from relatives slowed down. The nasty Facebook posts disappeared, either deleted by her or drowned out by silence. A few people even reached out privately to apologize for believing her version of the story. It was surreal, like waking up after a long nightmare and realizing the world hadn't ended after all. I let myself breathe again. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. I started focusing back on work, on my life, on the things I had fought so hard to build without her. A part of me even dared to hope she'd finally back down, realized her tactics weren't working anymore. Maybe she'd move on to some other scheme, some other target. One night, sitting on my balcony with a cheap beer, I allowed myself to think, maybe it's over. Maybe I could finally put the whole thing behind me, file it away with the other wounds she'd left, and keep moving forward. But deep down, a nagging thought lingered. My mom never quit. Not when there was attention to be gained. Not when there was sympathy to be milked. Quiet wasn't her style. Silence wasn't her victory. And sure enough, the calm didn't last long. It started small, another relative forwarding me a screenshot of her posting vague, "pray for me" statuses. Then, whispers that she'd been visiting people in person, telling them stories too outrageous to put online. And then, something bigger, something that would drag me back into the chaos head first. I should have known better than to think it was finished. The storm was only gathering strength. The first real sign came in the form of a letter. Not an email, not a text. An actual envelope shoved under my apartment door. Inside was a neatly folded piece of paper with my name typed across the top. For a second, I thought it might be from my landlord. But no. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was a demand letter. From a collection agency. Apparently, someone had opened a line of credit in my name. Thousands of dollars already charged, payments overdue. And the kicker? The address listed on the application was my mom's house. I sat there on the floor, letter trembling in my hands, my pulse hammering in my ears. This wasn't just lies on Facebook anymore. This was fraud. This was criminal. And if I didn't fight it, it would destroy my credit, my stability, everything I had fought for since the day she threw me out. I called the number on the letter immediately, explaining the situation. They didn't care. To them, I was just another debtor making excuses. "If it's fraud, you'll need to file a police report," the rep said, voice flat, like she'd heard it 1,000 times before. That night, I barely slept. My thoughts were spiraling. What if this kept happening? What if she'd already opened more accounts? What if, in the eyes of the law, I was the one who owed? I felt cornered, trapped, like being 18 again, thrown out with nothing but a trash bag. Only this time, the weight wasn't just emotional. It was legal, financial, inescapable. I knew I had to act fast. The next day, I filed a fraud report with the credit bureaus, froze my accounts, and went to the police station to file an official complaint. Saying the words out loud, my mother committed identity theft against me. felt unreal, like I was betraying some sacred rule of family. But then I remembered her laugh. Her words, "History is what people believe." If she wanted to rewrite history, I was going to give her a new ending. Of course, filing the report didn't make her back down. If anything, it seemed to enrage her. Within days, she was calling nonstop, leaving voicemails that swung between sobbing pleas and vicious threats. "How could you do this to your own mother?" one message wailed. Then the next would be cold and sharp. "You think the cops will protect you? I'll ruin you before they even lift a finger." And then came the social backlash. People I hadn't heard from in years started messaging me, accusing me of being cruel, ungrateful, even evil. I realized she was telling everyone I had framed her, that I was trying to put her in jail because I hated her. Some even believed it. My phone lit up with accusations, insults, even threats from strangers. It was a smear campaign, only now with real stakes. She wasn't just trying to guilt me. She was trying to destroy me completely. I hit my lowest point when a coworker pulled me aside. "Hey, man, someone sent an email about you. I don't know if you should see it." Against his advice, I opened it. There it was, a long rant, written under a fake account, but clearly her words, blasting me as a predator, a liar, a heartless son who abuses women. None of it true, but damning enough to plant seeds of doubt. Seeing those words in black and white broke something in me. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was war. But in that moment, something inside me hardened. I realized that staying quiet, trying to outlast her, wasn't going to work. She thrived in silence. She thrived in shadows. The only way to beat her was to drag everything into the light. I had the proof. I had the police report. I had the receipts. It was time to go all in. What happened next made me question everything I thought I knew about family and about myself. I thought filing the police report would give me some sense of safety, like finally putting a wall between her and me. Instead, it felt like pouring gasoline on a fire. The backlash came faster, louder, and from directions I didn't even expect. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly blowing up my phone. Some cursed me out. Others begged me to drop it and not ruin her life. A cousin even told me, "You'll regret this when she's gone. She's still your mom." It was like no one cared that she was actively trying to ruin me. They only cared about the optics of a son taking legal action against his mother. And at work, the fallout began to creep in. Whispers in the break room. Sideways glances from people I'd known for years. HR called me in just to check in after they received an anonymous complaint, one I knew came straight from her fake emails. I defended myself, showed what I could, but the seed was planted, doubt. Suddenly, I wasn't just a guy doing his job. I was that guy with drama attached. One night, sitting alone in my apartment, I stared at the wall and wondered if she had finally won. My credit was bruised, my reputation tarnished, my family poisoned against me. Even the thought of dating, building friendships, creating a future felt impossible when I was constantly bracing for the next grenade she'd throw. The worst part wasn't the anger anymore. It was the exhaustion. I felt hollow. Like every ounce of energy I had built over the years, every bit of progress since being thrown out at 18, was being siphoned away by her chaos. She was still controlling me, even from a distance, even after all this time. I caught myself thinking the unthinkable. Maybe I should just give her what she wants. Maybe if I paid off some of those debts, even a fraction, she'd finally stop. Maybe if I played the dutiful son for once, I could buy some peace. That thought scared me more than anything she had done, because it meant she had gotten into my head so deeply that I was willing to betray myself just to make the noise stop. I sat there, head in my hands, fighting back tears I hadn't let myself cry in years. I felt like I was 18 again, lost, powerless, begging for mercy that wasn't coming. And then, in the quiet of that breaking point, something shifted. A single realization cut through the fog. Silence and submission were the very things that had kept me trapped all these years. If I gave in now, I wasn't buying peace. I was handing her the keys to destroy me completely. I didn't know how yet, but I knew what had to happen. This wasn't about debts anymore. This was about survival. About drawing a line so clear she could never cross it again. That night, the day of the confrontation wasn't planned. It just happened. After weeks of drowning in chaos, I reached a breaking point. I'd spent nights collecting proof, days defending myself against rumors, and every spare moment bracing for her next attack. Then one Saturday morning, I got a call from my aunt. She's at it again. She's telling people you forged the police report. That was it. Enough was enough. I grabbed the folder I'd built, my receipts file, printed out and organized, and drove straight to her house. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, not from fear this time, but from adrenaline. I wasn't going there to beg or to explain. I was going there to end it. When I pulled up, she was outside on the porch, cigarette in hand, looking smug, as if she already knew I'd come running back. Well, she said, blowing out smoke. Took you long enough. Ready to do the right thing. I walked up the steps, meeting her eyes. No, I'm ready to end this. Her smile faltered. I opened the folder, spreading papers across the table on her porch, screenshots of her fake posts, printouts of her fabricated texts, affidavits from relatives who admitted she lied, the police report. Every ugly piece of evidence laid out in black and white. For the first time, she looked rattled. She reached for one of the pages, skimmed it, then scoffed. So what? You think some papers are going to change what people believe? I leaned closer. It's not just papers. It's proof. Proof I've already given to the police. Proof I'll give to every single person you've lied to. Proof that, if I need to, I'll take to court. You don't own this story anymore. I do. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. You'd really destroy your own mother? After everything I sacrificed for you. Sacrificed. The word ripped out of me, sharper than I intended. You kicked me out at 18. You left me to starve, to sleep in my car, to claw my way up from nothing. And now you're stealing my name, my reputation, my life? You don't get to call that sacrifice. Her face hardened, and for a moment I thought she'd scream, but instead she went cold, almost calculated. You think you're strong now, but you'll always need me. One day you'll regret this. I shook my head. No, the only regret I have is waiting this long to stand up to you. Then I did what I should have done years ago. I walked away. I left the folder on her table, the evidence staring back at her like a mirror she couldn't break. I didn't wait for her reply, didn't look back at her face. I got in my car, slammed the door, and drove off. That night, I sent the same folder to every relative, every family friend, every person she had poisoned against me. No explanations, no emotional appeals, just the facts. Screenshots, timelines, statements. Let them decide who was lying. The fallout was immediate. Messages poured in, some apologizing, some stunned, some admitting they'd suspected but didn't want to believe. My aunt called, her voice shaking. You finally did it. You exposed her. Even my uncle, who had stayed neutral for years, told me, you don't owe her a damn thing. As for my mom, the silence was deafening. No more calls, no more fake accounts, no more smear campaigns. For the first time in years, she had nothing left to throw at me. Standing in my apartment that night, phone buzzing with supportive messages, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. Not peace, not forgiveness, but freedom. The weight was gone. She had tried to rewrite history, but I had written the ending. And this time, it was mine.